In the vastness of space, where silence often reigns supreme, an unexpected event sent ripples through the galaxy. The Xather Empire, a powerful and technologically advanced race, had been the dominant force for centuries. They ruled over many star systems, unchallenged and unrivaled. Their ships cruised through space, leaving awe and fear in their wake. But everything was about to change. It all began with a strange signal. The Xather Empire's main communication hub, the heart of their vast network, suddenly detected a faint but persistent transmission. At first, it seemed like a malfunction. Space was full of static, cosmic interference, and occasional random signals. But this one was different. The signal was clear, persistent, and unlike anything the Xather had ever encountered before. The signal seemed to be coming from deep space, far beyond the territories the Xather had explored. It was not just a simple distress call. It was a message, a beacon. The frequency and coding were not like anything the Xather had ever encountered. It was too organized, too purposeful. It was a deliberate call for help, and it wasn't coming from a species the Xather had ever known. Aboard the flagship of the Xather fleet, Commander Varish stood before a holographic display, watching the transmission flicker across the screen. His cold, calculating eyes narrowed as he listened to the message. The transmission was alien, but there was something about it that intrigued him. It wasn't like the usual distress signals they encountered from lesser races. This was different. He leaned closer, analyzing the structure of the signal, trying to make sense of the language. "Commander, this message is strange," an officer said from behind him. "It's unlike anything we've ever decoded. It's not from any known species." Varish didn't respond immediately. He stared at the signal, his mind working quickly to understand what this meant. The Xather Empire had always been cautious in their dealings with other races. They believed in strength, power, and control, not in alliances or peace. Yet this signal posed a question. If the Xather couldn't recognize it, what was it? Was it a trap? A trick by another alien species, or something far more dangerous? "Send a fleet to investigate," Varish ordered after a long pause. "I want to know where this signal is coming from. We'll learn everything we can. And if it's a threat, we'll eliminate it." The command was clear. The Xather fleet, one of the largest and most feared in the galaxy, began moving toward the source of the mysterious signal. Their ships were massive, designed for both offensive and defensive warfare, equipped with weaponry that could obliterate entire planets. As the fleet moved through space, the tension among the Xather officers grew. It wasn't every day that they received an unknown message from deep space. As the fleet approached the origin of the signal, the vast emptiness of space seemed to swallow them. There were no stars nearby, no recognizable objects or planets, just a deep, dark void. The emptiness was unsettling, as if they were heading into a place where nothing should exist. The fleet moved cautiously, their sensors scanning the surroundings for any sign of danger. Then there it was. In the middle of the empty expanse, a massive object appeared on their scanners. It was unlike anything the Xather had ever seen. A huge metallic structure, shaped like a giant vessel, drifting silently in space. It was clearly artificial, but it didn't belong to any known species. The structure had an otherworldly design, sleek and angular, with strange markings that no one could identify. The source of the signal was coming from this ship. For a moment, no one in the Xather fleet spoke. They simply stared at the object. The size alone was enough to leave them stunned. This was no ordinary ship. It was huge, far larger than anything the Xather had ever built. But it wasn't just the size that caught their attention. It was the feeling of mystery and danger that surrounded it. Commander Varish's voice cut through the silence. "Prepare the boarding party. We need to investigate this ship. I want answers. If this is a trap, we'll destroy it. But if it's something else, we need to know what we're dealing with." The Xather fleet moved closer to the unknown vessel, their weapons primed and their shields raised. As they drew near, The ship's surface shimmered in the light of distant stars, and the energy signature from the ship began to pulse. It was powerful, yet strange, not like anything the Exather had ever encountered. The ship was old, that much was clear. The metal was weathered and worn, but it still radiated an aura of power. A small shuttle was launched from the Exather flagship, its crew ready to board the mysterious vessel. As they approached the strange ship, they could see that it was covered in symbols, markings that suggested an alien origin, but nothing the Exather could identify. The shuttle docked, and the boarding team entered the ship's airlock. The moment they crossed the threshold, the atmosphere shifted. The temperature was colder than normal, and the air felt heavy, as if the ship had been abandoned for a long time. Inside, the team found themselves in what appeared to be a massive, darkened chamber. Strange lights flickered on the walls, and the hum of unfamiliar machinery filled the air. The atmosphere was thick with mystery. The team moved cautiously, their weapons raised, unsure of what they might find. As they advanced further into the ship, they began to notice something else. The ship was not as deserted as it appeared. There were signs of life, faint traces of movement, and the odd sense that they were being watched. Every step they took seemed to echo in the silent halls. It was clear that something, or someone, was here, and they were not alone. Back aboard the Exather flagship, Commander Varish watched the live feed from the boarding team. His eyes never left the screen as he observed the crew move deeper into the alien vessel. This was no ordinary find. The Exather had faced many challenges in their rise to power, but this was different. Whatever the ship was, it was far more than they had expected. And there was a nagging feeling in the pit of Varish's stomach, a sense that they had just opened a door to something much larger than they had anticipated. He wasn't sure what the outcome would be, but one thing was clear. The Exather Empire had just encountered something that would change the course of the galaxy forever. The mystery of the human battleship had only just begun, and as the boarding team continued to explore the strange ship, one question echoed in every mind. Who were the humans, and how had they created something so powerful? As the Exather boarding team made their way deeper into the strange human battleship, the sense of unease grew. Every hallway they walked through seemed more ancient, more foreboding. The flickering lights cast long shadows against the metallic walls, their steps echoing in the eerie silence of the abandoned vessel. It was clear that the ship had been left uninhabited for a long time, yet its technology was sophisticated, far beyond anything the Exather had seen before. It was as if the ship had been forgotten by time itself. Commander Varish watched the live feed from his flagship, his eyes narrowed in deep concentration. His mind raced. This ship, this alien craft, was unlike anything the Exather Empire had ever encountered. Its size, its design, and its advanced technology all pointed to one thing. This was no ordinary ship. It had to be of great importance, and the distress signal that had brought them here was a cry for help from a species they had never heard of before, humans. A species that the Exather knew nothing about, yet their ship was far more advanced than any race the Empire had ever encountered. Back aboard the ship, the Exather boarding team proceeded cautiously. Their boots clanged against the metal floors as they entered the main command center. The area was vast and dimly lit, with panels and screens displaying information in an unknown language. The walls were lined with intricate alien symbols, none of which the team could decipher. The hum of machinery was constant, but nothing moved. It was almost as though the ship was waiting for something or someone. "Stay alert," ordered Sergeant Korath, the leader of the boarding party. "We don't know what we're dealing with here." Korath's voice echoed through the chamber as the team spread out, inspecting the various control panels and consoles. Each one was unrecognizable to the Exather, who were accustomed to their own advanced systems. There were no standard communication channels, no familiar interfaces. Everything on this ship was foreign, yet the technology was clearly beyond anything the Exather had ever developed. Suddenly, one of the officers, Lieutenant Varick, called out from across the room. "I found something." The team quickly gathered around him as he pointed to a massive central console. It was different from the others. It had a glowing blue symbol at its core, a symbol that pulsed rhythmically. The officer reached out cautiously and pressed a button. The entire room shuddered slightly, and the ship's lights flickered to life. A low rumbling sound reverberated throughout the ship as if it were waking from a long slumber. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the console screen came to life, displaying an image. It was a map, an enormous star system with lines and pathways drawn across it in a complex grid. The map was centered on one specific point, and it was clear that the destination marked was of immense importance. "This is it," Lieutenant Varick said, his voice filled with awe. "This is the humans' home system, and it looks like they've charted a course here for some reason." Korath stepped closer, studying the map intently. The Exather Empire had explored countless star systems, but this one was unknown to them. It was far from their core territories, and the data on the screen suggested that the humans had been in space far longer than anyone had realized. Before they could investigate further, a strange sound echoed through the ship. It wasn't a mechanical noise, but something more organic, almost like a low hum. The hairs on the back of the Exather officers' necks stood up. Something was stirring in the depths of the ship. "Prepare yourselves," Korath ordered, his voice low and filled with tension. "We don't know what we'll find here." The sound grew louder, and suddenly, the lights in the room dimmed. The blue symbol on the central console flickered erratically before the entire ship seemed to vibrate with energy. The ground beneath their feet trembled as if the ship was alive, reacting to something they couldn't understand. Then, in an instant, everything went dark. The Exather team stood frozen in the blackness, unsure of what to do next. The lights came back on suddenly, and they saw that the once empty command center was no longer alone. Figures stood in the shadows, barely visible but undeniably present. The shape of their forms was distinctively humanoid, but their features were distorted, as though they were projections from another time. The atmosphere thickened, and the silence became oppressive. One of the humanoid figures stepped forward, its eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. It raised its hand in a slow, deliberate motion. The team's weapons were immediately raised, pointing directly at the figure. Korath's eyes narrowed, and he gestured for his officers to hold steady. "What is this?" Korath demanded. "Who are you?" The figure's voice was soft, yet it carried an undeniable weight. "We are the ones who sent the signal. You have answered our call, but you do not understand the danger." The Exather officers exchanged confused glances. Who were these beings, and what did they mean by danger? The figure continued. "You do not know what you have awakened. The humans you encounter are not the weaklings you believe them to be. They are not like other species. They are survivors. They are warriors." Korath's grip tightened on his weapon. "Survivors? What do you mean? Explain yourself." The figure's glowing eyes flashed, and the room seemed to grow colder. "The humans are not of this galaxy. They have traveled far and wide, exploring unknown regions of space. They have faced countless challenges, but what you see before you is only a fraction of their strength. You have awakened the power of their battleships, the might of their fleet. The humans will come, and when they do, they will bring destruction." The Exather team stood in stunned silence. The implications of what they were hearing were incomprehensible. The humans, a species they had believed to be primitive and insignificant, were far more dangerous than they could have imagined. Suddenly, the ship's systems flickered again, and the figure dissolved into nothingness, leaving the room cold and empty once more. The Exather officers stood in shock, unable to process what had just happened. Korath turned to his team, his face grim. "We need to get back to the fleet now. Whatever this ship is, it's not just a relic. The humans, they're coming." As the boarding team made their way back to their shuttle, a sense of dread washed over them. The first encounter with the humans had opened a door to a larger, more terrifying truth. The galaxy had just become a far more dangerous place, and the Exather Empire would soon discover just how powerful humanity could be. As they left the mysterious ship behind, the boarding team couldn't help but wonder, had they just awakened a sleeping giant? The answer was something they would soon find out. The Exather fleet drifted through space, anchored in a strange silence after the shocking encounter. Commander Varish stood alone in the command center of his flagship, his eyes fixed on the holographic map of the galaxy. The transmission from the mysterious human ship had thrown him into a state of unease. What had they just discovered? What kind of force could a race of humans wield that would leave such an impression on his crew? His mind raced with the possibilities. For centuries, the Exather Empire had been unchallenged. They had crushed empires and civilizations without mercy, leaving nothing but ashes in their wake. Yet here, in the unknown reaches of space, an alien species had just given them a glimpse of something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. And this was only the beginning. "Commander, the boarding team has returned." An officer's voice pulled Varish from his thoughts. He straightened and turned to face the officer. "Bring them in." Moments later, Lieutenant Varick and Sergeant Korath entered, their faces grim. They didn't speak at first, only exchanged uneasy glances before Korath spoke up. "We've encountered something beyond our understanding, Commander. That ship is not like anything we've ever seen. Its technology, its design, it's far beyond our capabilities. And the beings on board, they warned us." Varish's piercing gaze never wavered. "Warned you about what?" "About the humans," Varick replied. "They said we've awakened something, that the humans are not what we thought. They are warriors, survivors, and their battleships." He trailed off, his voice faltering slightly. "We've made a grave mistake." Varish remained silent for a moment, his expression unreadable. The implications of the encounter were still settling in his mind. For the Exather Empire, power had always been synonymous with fear. No one dared challenge their might, and they had relied on this dominance for centuries. But the humans were different. If what Varick and Korath were saying was true, the Exather Empire was no longer the apex predator in the galaxy. The thought was almost unthinkable. "What else did you learn?" Varish asked, his voice low. Korath spoke again, his voice unwavering despite the weight of his words. "The human ship is far more advanced than ours. It's made of materials we don't recognize, and its weapon systems are unlike anything we've ever seen. We've never encountered technology that can match or surpass ours, but this ship, it could wipe us out if it wanted to." Varick nodded, adding, "And there's more. The humanoid figure we encountered on board, the one who spoke to us, it told us that the humans have been traveling across galaxies, surviving against species far stronger than themselves. They've faced dangers we can't even imagine, and they've only grown stronger." Varish's brow furrowed as he processed the information. "And now they will come for us." Korath didn't answer right away, but it was clear that the answer was a resounding yes. The warning was clear. The humans would not sit idly by as the Exather Empire made its move. They had awakened something that was now watching, waiting. It was only a matter of time before the humans' wrath descended upon them. "Prepare the fleet," Varish said, his voice cold and determined. "We will not wait for them to make the first move. We will strike first." The command was given, and the Exather fleet began to mobilize. Their ships, massive and terrifying, positioned themselves for battle. The fleet was unrivaled in its sheer power. Until now. But something in Varish's gut told him that this was not going to be an easy victory. The humans were different. The warning from the mysterious figure was something Varish couldn't shake from his mind. "Commander," another officer spoke up, his voice filled with uncertainty. "The humans' battleships are still a mystery to us. We have no idea how they're capable of such advanced technology. And the human homeworld, it's far from here. Do we really want to engage them without knowing the full extent of their power?" Varish's expression hardened. He had never been one to back down from a fight. The Exather Empire had never shied away from conflict. But this was different. The humans weren't like the other races they had decimated. They were unpredictable, fierce, and they would not be easily intimidated. "We will proceed with caution," Varish replied, his voice resolute. "But we cannot let fear dictate our actions. The humans will not sit quietly. They will retaliate. It's only a matter of time." As the Exather fleet moved into position, preparing for what was sure to be a battle like none they had faced before, a sense of dread hung over them. No one knew exactly what to expect when they crossed paths with the humans, but the unease was palpable. Meanwhile, light years away on the human battleship that had sent the mysterious SOS signal, something was stirring. Deep within the core of the ship, its systems hummed with life. The long slumber was over. The ship, which had once been dormant, was now fully awake, and its weapon systems powered up. The human crew, though they were far from the battlefield, were aware of the danger. They had felt the pulse of the unknown ship's distress signal, and they knew what it meant. Their first contact with the Exather Empire had opened a new chapter in their history, and the humans were ready. On the command deck, Captain Avery stood with a hardened expression, looking out over the vastness of space. The transmission had been received, and the Exather had responded. But now it was time for the humans to show what they were capable of. "They have no idea what they're in for," Avery muttered under his breath. The crew knew the stakes. The Exather might have had an empire built on fear and power, but the humans had something that the Exather lacked: resolve. The humans had been fighting for survival for centuries. They had learned to adapt, to survive against overwhelming odds. And now they were facing a threat unlike anything they had ever known. The captain turned to his crew. "Prepare for battle. They won't know what hit them." The words hung in the air, and the hum of the ship's systems became louder as the countdown began. The humans were ready for their first real fight against the Exather Empire. And when the time came, they would show the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. The battle for supremacy in the galaxy was about to begin, and neither side could afford to back down. As the Exather fleet advanced, the anticipation grew. What would happen when the two forces finally clashed? Would the Exather be able to maintain their dominance, or had they finally met their match in the humans? The galaxy watched, waiting for the inevitable confrontation to unfold. The countdown had begun, and the tension was palpable across the Exather fleet. Commander Varish paced back and forth in the war room of his flagship, his eyes fixed on the holographic map before him. The fleet was in position, and all weapons systems had been primed. Everything was in place for the battle that would decide the fate of the Exather Empire. Despite the preparation, Varish felt a nagging doubt deep in his chest. The humans were a mystery, and the more he thought about the warnings they had received, the more uncertain he became. But there was no turning back now. The first shot had been fired, and the Exather Empire could not afford to show weakness. "Commander," a voice broke through his thoughts. It was Lieutenant Varick, standing at attention with a grave expression on his face. "We have detected an incoming signal. It's from the human ship." Varish turned sharply, his mind racing. "What is it? Are they initiating communications?" Varick shook his head. "No, Commander. It's not a communication. It's a power surge. Their ships are activating their weapon systems." Varish's heart skipped a beat. The humans weren't waiting. They were preparing for the inevitable confrontation, and it was clear that they intended to fight. The question now was, what would the Exather face when they encountered these mysterious human ships? The unknown technology, the power they had barely glimpsed, it all pointed to one thing: this battle was not going to be like any other. "Status of our fleet," Varish demanded. "All ships are in position, weapons primed," the officer responded. "But the humans are far more prepared than we anticipated. They're moving faster than expected, and their weapons are already coming online." Varish clenched his fists. "Then we move now. No more hesitation." The orders were given, and the Exather fleet advanced. their massive warships cutting through space with brutal precision. As the ships neared the human fleet's last known coordinates, the Xathar fleet maintained a disciplined formation, each ship a deadly weapon in its own right. The idea of facing an unknown enemy in the vast emptiness of space was unsettling, but the Xathar had always prided themselves on their ability to dominate. Now, they were prepared to crush the humans before they could even begin to retaliate. But as they closed in, the Xathar were about to realize that their enemy was not what they had expected. Just as they neared the position where the human ships were thought to be, something strange happened. The sensors on Varish's ship began to spike, and a series of deep rumbling sounds vibrated through the hull. "Commander, we're detecting massive energy signatures," Lieutenant Varric called out, his voice tight with surprise. "It's coming from multiple points across the system. We're not dealing with just a few ships." Varish's eyes widened. "How many are there?" "Thousands, Commander. We've never seen anything like it. These ships, these human ships, are not just weapons. They're everywhere." The Xathar fleet had barely gotten into position when the first sign of the human presence appeared, a streak of light across the dark expanse of space. At first, it was just one, then two, then dozens of blinding flashes. The human ships, sleek and intimidating, appeared in the distance. They were not just a few scattered vessels. They were a massive force, seemingly materializing from every corner of the galaxy. These ships were enormous, larger than any Xathar warship, and they moved with an eerie, silent precision. The humans had been waiting for them, prepared in ways that the Xathar had never imagined. The hum of the Xathar flagship's weapon systems charging grew louder, but Varish knew it would be futile to fire without a clear plan. The human ships moved in perfect formation, and their weapons were charging faster than Varish had anticipated. "Commander, the humans are locking onto our ships," shouted an officer. Before Varish could respond, a massive beam of energy cut through space, slamming into the front of the Xathar flagship. The ship shuddered violently, and alarms began blaring throughout the vessel. "What was that?" Varish bellowed. The officer quickly scanned the damage reports. "It's one of their main cannons. It's unlike anything we've ever encountered. We've sustained heavy damage to the hull. Shields are down to 40%. Varish gritted his teeth, his fury barely contained. "Return fire. All ships, engage the enemy." The Xathar fleet erupted into action, their massive guns firing in synchronized precision, but the human ships, though outnumbered, were faster and more coordinated. They danced around the Xathar warships, dodging blasts with ease and returning fire with devastating accuracy. The Xathar had never faced such an opponent. The humans fought with ruthless determination, and their technology was not just advanced. It was alien in its efficiency. Commander Varish watched in disbelief as several of his fleet's ships were torn apart by the human assault. The human vessels were relentless, and their firepower was overwhelming. Despite the Xathar's superior numbers and their fearsome reputation, they were being pushed back, their once proud fleet reeling from the unexpected onslaught. "Commander, we need to pull back," one of Varish's officers screamed, but Varish refused to give the order. He could not retreat, not after everything the Xathar had fought for. They had to win, or they would be nothing. "Hold the line," Varish shouted. "We fight to the end." But it was clear to everyone on the flagship that the situation was deteriorating. The humans weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting to dominate. Every blow they struck was calculated, every attack precise. Their ships moved in perfect synchrony, as though each one was an extension of the others, their advanced weapons tearing through the Xathar defenses with brutal efficiency. A series of bright flashes lit up the blackness of space, and Varish watched in horror as several Xathar warships vanished in the blink of an eye, consumed by the overwhelming power of the human guns. The gap between the Xathar and the humans was closing quickly, and the Xathar were losing ground. At the heart of the human fleet, Captain Avery stood at the command deck of his flagship, staring out into the battlefield. The human ships had been waiting for this moment, and now that it had arrived, they fought with an intensity born from years of survival. They had faced annihilation before, but this time, they would not be the ones to fall. "Hold steady, everyone," Captain Avery said, his voice firm. "We take them down, one ship at a time." The battle raged on, with each side dealing devastating blows to the other. The human fleet moved like a swarm of deadly predators, and the HFY, for the first time in their history, were feeling the sting of defeat. For Varish, it became clear, the humans were not the primitive, weak species they had believed them to be. They were warriors with a strength and power that the HFY had underestimated. The encounter with humanity had already proven one thing beyond doubt. This would be a battle to the death. As the chaos of battle continued to unfold, one thing was certain. The galaxy would never be the same again. And for the HFY Empire, the war for supremacy was only just beginning. The battle in space raged on, the sounds of weapons fire echoing in the cold vacuum of space. The once mighty HFY fleet, invincible in the eyes of so many, was now struggling against the relentless assault of the human ships. Their grand strategy, honed over centuries of conquest and domination, was failing. The humans were unlike any enemy the HFY had ever faced before. Commander Varish gritted his teeth as the holographic display showed another HFY warship being obliterated by a barrage of energy pulses from the human fleet. The HFY fleet had been caught off guard by the humans' advanced weapon systems and impeccable coordination. It was as if the human ships were all part of one massive, perfectly synchronized force, a terrifyingly efficient army of warships that seemed to anticipate their every move. "Status report," Varish barked, gripping the console in front of him as the shaking of the flagship continued. The force of the impacts reverberated through the ship's hull. "Shields are down to 25% and dropping fast, Commander." An officer responded. "We've lost 3 more warships. The human ships are swarming us. We can't keep up." Varish's mind raced. He had never seen such a coordinated assault. The humans were fighting like a unified force, their ships weaving in and out of the HFY fleet with terrifying precision. Their weapons were unlike anything the HFY had encountered. Powerful energy beams that tore through the hulls of warships with ease, and missiles that seemed to track their targets with unnatural accuracy. It was as if the humans had somehow learned the weaknesses of the HFY ships before the battle even started. And then there was the shockwave. It happened in an instant. The human flagship, a massive behemoth at the heart of the human fleet, unleashed a powerful pulse of energy so concentrated it distorted the space around it. The shockwave sent a ripple through the battlefield, knocking several HFY warships off course. The HFY flagship staggered under the pressure, its systems flickering. Varish's vision blurred for a moment, and he had to fight to steady himself. It was like nothing he had ever felt before. "Commander," Varish shouted, his voice full of alarm. "They're using some kind of destabilizing energy. It's disabling our ships." Varish's hands gripped the armrests of his command chair. He had underestimated them. These humans were no ordinary species, no vulnerable, untested race. They were the apex predators of the galaxy, a force to be reckoned with. "Reinforcements," Varish barked. "Call for reinforcements from the southern quadrant. We need backup." His orders were sent, but Varish knew it might be too late. The human fleet was relentless. Every second that passed, the HFY were losing more ships, more territory. Their empire, once vast and unchallenged, was now on the brink of collapse. "Commander," a voice called, and Varish turned to find Lieutenant Varick, with an uneasy look on his face. "We have intercepted another transmission from the human flagship." Varish narrowed his eyes. The last transmission they had received was a warning, a declaration that the humans would fight to the last. But this message was different. Varick handed him a small device, and Varish inserted it into the console. A deep, resonating voice echoed through the war room. "This is Captain Avery of the human warfleet," the voice said, calm but with an undeniable edge of finality. "We do not seek conquest. We only seek survival. We faced extinction before, and we fought back. The X-Ather Empire has proven to us that they believe themselves to be invincible. But no empire, no matter how powerful, can survive against a species that has learned to fight for its life. We are coming for you, and we will not stop until every last one of your ships is destroyed." The message ended abruptly. Varish stood motionless, staring at the hologram before him. He had known the humans would retaliate, but the intensity in Captain Avery's voice sent a chill through his body. The humans weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting for something deeper, something that had been hardwired into their very existence. They had faced horrors unimaginable to the X-Ather, and yet they had emerged victorious every time. The X-Ather had been conquerors, takers of worlds and empires, but now they were facing a species that had learned to fight, to adapt, to overcome, and to survive against overwhelming odds. The humans were relentless, driven by a force the X-Ather had never encountered. "Commander," Varick's voice broke Varish from his thoughts. "We can't keep up. Our ships are falling one by one. If we don't retreat now, we will be completely annihilated." Varish's jaw tightened. Retreat, it was unthinkable. The X-Ather had never known defeat. But now, looking out at the vast expanse of space where his fleet was being dismantled, he knew the truth. "Commander, we're detecting massive energy signatures," Lieutenant Varick called out, his voice tight with surprise. "It's coming from multiple points across the system. We're not dealing with just a few ships." Varish's eyes widened. "How many are there?" "Thousands, Commander. We've never seen anything like it. These ships, these human ships, are not just weapons. They're everywhere." The X-Ather fleet had barely gotten into position when the first sign of the human presence appeared. A streak of light across the dark expanse of space. At first, it was just one, then two, then dozens of blinding flashes. The human ships, sleek and intimidating, appeared in the distance. They were not just a few scattered vessels. They were a massive force, seemingly materializing from every corner of the galaxy. These ships were enormous, larger than any X-Ather warship, and they moved with an eerie, silent precision. The humans had been waiting for them, prepared in ways that the X-Ather had never imagined. The hum of the X-Ather flagship's weapon systems charging grew louder, but Varish knew it would be futile to fire without a clear plan. The human ships moved in perfect formation, and their weapons were charging faster than Varish had anticipated. "Commander, the humans are locking onto our ships," shouted an officer. Before Varish could respond, a massive beam of energy cut through space, slamming into the front of the X-Ather flagship. The ship shuddered violently, and alarms began blaring throughout the vessel. "What was that?" Varish bellowed. The officer quickly scanned the damage reports. "It's one of their main cannons. It's unlike anything we've ever encountered. We've sustained heavy damage to the hull. Shields are down to 40%. Varish gritted his teeth, his fury barely contained. "Return fire. All ships, engage the enemy." The X-Ather fleet erupted into action, their massive guns firing in synchronized precision, but the human ships, though outnumbered, were faster and more coordinated. They danced around the X-Ather warships, dodging blasts with ease and returning fire with devastating accuracy. The X-Ather had never faced such an opponent. The humans fought with ruthless determination, and their technology was not just advanced. It was alien in its efficiency. Commander Varish watched in disbelief as several of his fleet's ships were torn apart by the human assault. The human vessels were relentless, and their firepower was overwhelming. Despite the X-Ather's superior numbers and their fearsome reputation, they were being pushed back, their once proud fleet reeling from the unexpected onslaught. "Commander, we need to pull back. One of Varish's officers screamed, but Varish refused to give the order. He could not retreat, not after everything the Exathar had fought for. They had to win, or they would be nothing. "Hold the line," Varish shouted. "We fight to the end." But it was clear to everyone on the flagship that the situation was deteriorating. The humans weren't just fighting to survive, they were fighting to dominate. Every blow they struck was calculated, every attack precise. Their ships moved in perfect synchrony, as though each one was an extension of the others, their advanced weapons tearing through the Exathar defenses with brutal efficiency. A series of bright flashes lit up the blackness of space, and Varish watched in horror as several Exathar warships vanished in the blink of an eye, consumed by the overwhelming power of the human guns. The gap between the Exathar and the humans was closing quickly, and the Exathar were losing ground. At the heart of the human fleet, Captain Avery stood at the command deck of his flagship, staring out into the battlefield. The human ships had been waiting for this moment, and now that it had arrived, they fought with an intensity born from years of survival. They had faced annihilation before, but this time, they would not be the ones to fall. "Hold steady, everyone," Captain Avery said, his voice firm. "We take them down, one ship at a time." The battle raged on, with each side dealing devastating blows to the other. The human fleet moved like a swarm of deadly predators, and the Exathar, for the first time in their history, were feeling the sting of defeat. For Varish, it became clear, the humans were not the primitive, weak species they had believed them to be. They were warriors with a strength and power that the Exathar had underestimated. The encounter with humanity had already proven one thing beyond doubt. This would be a battle to the death. As the chaos of battle continued to unfold, one thing was certain. The galaxy would never be the same again. And for the Exathar Empire, the war for supremacy was only just beginning.